you enjoying the class? Yes, we're coming down to the last third of the semester, and I know it's time to wind up some things in our learning. You might find it hard to believe, but there are some world religions classes taught at universities and colleges which skip Christianity. How could that be? Well, they take an attitude that most Americans are Christian, and thus a class with something that everyone already understands and knows about is sort of ridiculous. Well, our surveys over several semesters in this class have shown that it's untrue that everyone taking a class in world religions is Christian. We certainly, over the semesters here at St. Louis Community College, have had Muslim students, Jewish students, Buddhist students, Hindu students, and then individuals who are agnostic and atheist taking a class. And certainly they were eager to learn what I would have to share in terms of information about the Christian religious tradition. In fact, I'm going to suggest that even many of the individuals taking this class who self-identify as Christians really aren't, let's say, experts in their own faith. I teach a class some semesters called Early Christianity, and I'm sometimes really shocked to have students who in the class will self-identify as Christians, but who have never heard the name of the Apostle Paul and understand how his role in the early Christian tradition is integral in shaping what we have today as modern Christianity. So I think it's really appropriate that even for individuals who come from a Christian tradition, you be exposed to some of the ideas about its traditions and history and rituals. Most of you are probably aware that all Christians may share a common view of Jesus, but actual practices, beliefs, artistic representations that they use range considerably. And this has been true for not only the modern day, but in the past. From around 557 in the year 1900, with a doubling of that by 1970 to 1.2 billion. Almost another doubling in 30 years to the year 2000, where we estimate 2 billion Christians worldwide, and a projected 2.7 billion Christians in the year 2025. So from some very small number in the first century, probably only a couple of hundred or 1,000 individuals, Christianity has over the time grown and spread from not only its homeland in the Middle East and then into the Italian peninsula, but into Spain, across Europe, into North Africa, and eventually up into the areas of Northern Europe and even into the areas of Asia. By the way, the two crosses I show you here on this slide are currently in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia, but they are not Russian Orthodox. These are Coptic Christian art pieces. Coptic Christians are those traditional Christians still living in the modern country of Egypt, who believe that they are literally tracing back to the 1st century A.D., when their ancestors embraced the Christian religion. These woven crosses represent bejeweled crosses, crosses with gold and emeralds and silver and rubies on them. Those are the different colors, the red, the blue, the gold, and the silver colors. And that this represents the cross of Christ as something of great preciousness. Yes, at points in times, Christians have actually had crosses out of wood with jewels and gems on them to represent the great value and the preciousness, not of the object, but of their belief in Christ and his redemption of them for their sins. There are several anthropologists and sociologists who've examined the early Christian tradition and noted that it differs significantly from the history of the Judaic faith, the Hebrews. Judaism begins as a tribal religion, and through time it's changed and adapted, particularly during the times of David and Solomon. As they form a state-based economy and political system, the religious system evolves also. But Christianity doesn't begin with a tribal-level organization. Indeed, it begins right in the heart of the Roman Empire. And to some scholars, early Christianity has the hallmarks, the trappings of what we call a revitalization movement. What's a revitalization movement? It's an attempt by a group of individuals who are persecuted, who are underdogs, a group of individuals who are almost looking at their extinction to find a new life. That's what that revital means, to form a new identity, a new reason to exist, and a new charge. And oftentimes, revitalization movements have a charismatic leader who points a new way for that group to go. So for some scholars, Christianity is a revitalization movement among the Jewish communities of Palestine who are under severe persecution by the Romans. By the way, the Romans had a reason to persecute the Jewish community. That's because the Roman Empire was in conflict with a group of people to its east called the Parthian Empire. And there was almost an equal number of Jewish citizens in the Roman Empire as there were Jewish citizens in the Parthian Empire. And the Parthians spoke a language very similar to Hebrew. They spoke Aramaic, and they wrote with letters that looked very similar to Hebrew letters. And so Roman soldiers oftentimes were highly distrustful, and Roman administrators were even more distrustful of Jewish communities within their boundaries because of this shared population between the Parthian Empire, the dreaded evil empire of the Romans, and the Roman Empire itself. There's a major moment, of course, in the history of early Christianity, and that is the moment of the crucifixion of Jesus, approximately in the year AD 30. Because of that moment, the teachings that he had been given to his followers are abruptly cut off. And while they are told by his immediate small cadre of friends that he is going to return, that his death has purchased for them redemption for their sins, and that there's probably going to be a paradise waiting for those who can follow his teachings, that's awfully hard to believe with this shattering moment of the crucifixion of Jesus. A second shattering moment comes about 35 years later with the execution of the Apostle Paul. He, in his lifetime, had become the single most important interpreter of Jesus' teachings for this nascent, this small infant community of Jesus' followers. And with Paul's execution in AD 65, we have sort of, a moment where one of the important teachers within the early Christian community is taken away from them. Obviously, the most important teacher was that of Jesus. The second most important was Paul. Paul probably was not crucified. As a Roman citizen, he was more likely beheaded, an execution appropriate for someone who had a status within the Roman Empire, while crucifixion was used for those individuals which the Roman Empire literally held in contempt. Christianity would suffer persecutions for over 2 centuries as the Roman Empire attempted to smother it, to wipe it out, having quite a degree of suspicion of it. Partly because, like Judaism, Christianity quickly spread into the Parthian Empire, as well as spreading into sections of the Roman Empire. But by AD 313, the Roman Emperor Constantine would issue an edict saying that the persecution of Christianity could no longer happen because the most remarkable thing had occurred. The Roman Emperor himself had become a Christian. Now, there's actually traditions suggesting that before Constantine, there were elite Romans, sometimes the mothers of emperors, maybe even one of the emperors himself, who had secretly become Christian. But it would be 313 where we would have the first emperor who would outwardly express his identification with this religious tradition called Christianity. So we examine a lot of this material. But let me just show you 2 of my favorite artifacts. These come from the Christian catacombs under the modern city of Rome. They were found as fragments of cups and of bowls which had belonged to early Christians and which upon their death had been broken, and then the decorated base of this cup or bowl had been cemented into the wall near the place where the Christians were being buried. These catacomb burials, by the way, predate AD 313. And so the suggestion of these is 300 to 400 is obviously probably a pretty safe one. I suspect many of these are more likely AD 200 to 300. On the left-hand side, we have a piece of glass with gold work caught between 2 layers of the glass. And you might be able to make out the Latin names of 3 individuals. We have Petrus, Petrus, which you might know as Peter. Then we have Maria, Maria, who you, again, in English might know better as Mary. And then the last name, Paulus, Paulus, the name of the Apostle Paul. So Peter, Mary, and Paul. And of course, it's fascinating that Mary is the largest figure represented here between these two important early church fathers, Peter and Paul. This is Mary, the mother of Jesus. The Virgin Mary, as she's sometimes referred to in Christian tradition. And you might suggest that this represents the fact that these three important leaders and teachers within the Christian tradition after the death of Jesus were being celebrated by the individual who had paid to have this piece of artwork created. The second artifact on the right-hand side also comes from the Catacombs of Rome. Today, it is in the Israel National Museum because it represents something very interesting. We have a representation of two different menorahs in the bottom register of this glass artifact.